welcome everybody to this event. This is the Trinity Centre for Literary and Cultural Translation, as many of you already know. And I'm James Hadley, and I'm really delighted to welcome you here, and especially delighted to welcome Mona de Pracontal and Neil Hegarty back to the centre, because they both were here just before the pandemic hit. And Mona was working with us, or working here anyway. You were working with us.
Yes,
we were having lots of interesting
Yes.
conversations about while she was translating Inch Levels, and she has now realized the translation, and it's been published as, would you say the translation title, please?
La surface de l'eau.
Thank you. And so we're here to celebrate the launch of this book, and also to talk about Mona's process in translating it and everything in between. So you're welcome. Mona, how did you start working with Neil's book?
We met in Anna Carrick, where I've met at least one other person here. For those of you who don't know, Anna Carrick is the Tyrone Guthrie Center, and it's a wonderful place for writers, translators, dancer, I mean, any kind of art. And I think we first met in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes.
And yes. And we started talking, exchanging toast, and he gave me his book to read. Mm-hmm. And that's how it started. I mean, I read the book, and I thought of Joelle Losfeld, who's been publishing Irish literature for many, many years. She was really one of the first, if not, I think, a pioneer in France, publishing French, Irish literature. And she was very enthusiastic about the book. I mean, I think I've told you before, but I told her, listen, I'll send you the PDF. And then on Monday, I'll bring you the book. And that was on a Friday. And on Monday, she mailed me and she said, I read the PDF of the weekend and I really love it.
Oh, brilliant.
So that was it. And it's a long process because, as you said, COVID happened. And then when COVID started to finish, Joelle had many books. I mean, I suppose it's the same here. How do you publish all those books that have been translated or written? So finally, we're here, and very grateful to be here.
Oh, no, we're grateful. So Mona was actually the first French translation fellow. This whole scheme was in cooperation with the Embassy of France in Ireland, who very generously sponsored the whole fellowship, and we're actually delighted that we currently have our second fellow here tonight. That's Cecile. And so Mona, how did it feel for you to be the first of these fellows?
Nice. Okay, one thing.
No pressure.
I had a very unexpected moment of embarrassment, and I was grateful that I'm not blonde, and it doesn't show if I blush. It's the very first evening when I was here, and there was my picture on a huge screen behind me. I was like, oh my God, I'm dying. But I was also grateful to Michael, who did most of the talking of the introduction, so I could get over this shock. Other than that, it was really nice. I mean, as you remember, sometimes I didn't know how to balance between translation and extra translation activities, and none of us were really too sure. And I didn't know how it would be to work. There's a room upstairs study for translators, and there was Nina Kroll who was on a program with Literature Ireland. And I'm used to, I mean, translators, we work alone. That's what we do. But I decided, let's play the game and see how it works. And it was really nice. So, I mean, it's been a great experience.
Oh, that's good. I remember having lots of interesting conversations.
Me too.
It's amazing how you don't really get to grips with what a translator does until they come and bring you a translation problem and say, what, does it mean this or does it mean that?
Yeah.
And then I often say, well, it could mean either one, to be honest. And did you have any experience of being in Ireland before you came for the fellowship?
Yes, I've been coming to Ireland nearly every year for 20 odd years, but always going to the Tyrone Guthrie Centre. So for 2 decades, I thought I knew, I was getting to know Ireland pretty well, or rather well, but I met artists and writers in this wonderful environment. And coming to Dublin was so interesting because I realized how naive I was. There was a lunch organized at the Irish Embassy in Paris, where actually Cecile and myself both were. And I was saying that to somebody sitting next to me, and he says, well, maybe you're starting to begin to understand the Irish. But so being in Dublin, I realized I did not have the codes. I realized how many faux pas I might have done. And Neil was quite helpful. He did give me a few tricks as to how things are actually here. So
that's brilliant.
That was very interesting.
And how did you negotiate the Irishness of the book when you were translating? Like, was that a particular issue for you?
I need your help on the word Irishness. I mean, now we know you're Irish and you're from Derry, and obviously the novel is set in Donegal. I mean, would you say what percentage of Irishness do you find in the book? Or no?
Yeah, it is. I would say it feels like a fully Irish book, but it also problematizes that as well in terms of territory and landscape, because it is a novel about the border and the different codes, you might say, the different cultures that apply on either side of the border. And then also the sense of continuity, which also applies. So it's very, very layered. It's very complicated. Mona just spoke about the problems of understanding codes and sometimes not even being aware of what those codes are. And I think that the book deals with that as well. It addresses that as well. Especially in terms of things being unsaid, layers and layers and layers and layers of silence, but the unspoken. And some people understand what that unspoken consists of and what it means. And then, of course, other people don't. And why should they?
Yeah.
So yes, it's Irish, but it complicates that. It asks questions of what that word means.
Yeah.
All the different things that it might mean to different people.
So now when I'm translating the book, I have to balance between 2 things. I mean, because the Irishness of the writing of the story. One part where Neil could help me is, I was, I think, terrified to make blunders about the travels or the history. And I mean, strangely enough, I mean, I keep mentioning Anna McCarrick, but for 20 years, I realized that there were people from all different parts of the Republic and the North, but it's not discussed much, to say the least. And that part, and I was always scared because it's not, I never lived here. I don't have a very deep knowledge of Irish history. And I did not want to miss references or to, just make blunders. So there's this part. And the other part is whether a turn of phrase or way to say things is Irish in a way that you have to bring across its Irishness, or it's just Irish because Neil is Irish and he writes Irish English. I mean, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't want to make things quaint where they are not.
Yeah.
And we did, I mean, it was lovely also to be here in Dublin because Neil was very helpful and I was fortunate, and I guess he was maybe fortunate not to be too bored with my questions to discover an interesting translation. So initially I thought I would have a few questions, but we really had many long sessions.
Yeah.
And,
And do you find, Neil, that was like a formative process for you? Like, did you see the work in a way that you hadn't seen it before?
Yeah, definitely. I would say it was endlessly interesting. I would say, because you're looking again, you're approaching the novel again, but very self-consciously through somebody else's eyes, if you possibly can. You should have to step into a different kind of driving seat,
Yeah,
and see where that goes, and the things that that I might take for granted, you suddenly can't. Certain things have to be explained. You know, we keep using the word codes.
Yeah.
But certain things, I would say not very many things, but certain things have to be explained completely in order that Mona completely got what I have been trying to say at the beginning. So it was very, very interesting. And then we also went to Derry and Donegal. So Mona met me in Derry, and I spent a couple of days showing her the terrain. I suppose you could say deciphering the terrain all over again. And that's how it felt for me. It was a bit like if you take somebody to a place which means a lot to you, and you feel the kind of the emotional charge as well as the intellectual charge. It felt like that, except even more magnified, because there was a book at stake.
Yeah.
So those couple of days, I think, in that landscape were very, very quite intense and very, very meaningful, and I think anyway very formative for the whole process.
oh yeah, definitely. I mean, landscape plays a major role in the novel and is beautifully described. And actually, Neil offered to make that trip because I was telling him I wasn't sure how, you know, when the sea merges into water, but other than that, I mean, the sense of space in the seascapes or in inch levels, it really helped me to, you know, I mean, yeah, it really helped me translating and reading the book. And we also went to Derry, and that was very moving, and it helped me a little bit understand what might have happened, or because, I mean, I was telling Neil, I was surprised to see Derry. I mean, I've read about the travels, I've seen movies, but I guess in my mind's eye it would have looked different. And it looks so not small, but kind of a smaller scale that I had imagined. And it was a shock to realize that in that street, that's where terrible things happened. And so it's hard to pinpoint exactly how it helped, but it certainly did. Yes.
It sounds like it helped on a human level. Like,
yeah.
For you, on a formative level. And have you had such a close relationship, not only with the topography, but also with the source author of a book that you've been translating before?
Yes, yes.
Oh, you have?
Yes. Sometimes, well, if they're dead, it makes it more difficult. But I often get in touch with people I translate. And it's funny because I found out when I was quite at the beginning, translating fiction, is that people are not necessarily like their books. Like I remember approaching 2 American writers, and one was in his early 30s and very witty and very smart. And I thought he'd be kind of excited to be in touch with his translator. And basically he told me, you know, you do what you have to do. I trust your professional. And the other one wrote those beautiful novels, very melancholy, and I thought he'd be, you know, quiet and he was enthusiastic and says, oh, and he lived on the East Coast, and I was going to New York and going to Washington where he lived. And I said, maybe we can meet. He said, no, I'll be in Vermont and Montpelier, but if you have proofs to read or something, you could get on the train, and it's only 8 hours and it's lovely. And you could spend 2 days with my family because we are having a party, a pre-Christmas party. So I said, okay. I mean, I don't become friends with all writers I translate, but with some of them, yes.
That's brilliant. And maybe it has something to do with the authors, how they perceive translation, because maybe if they see it as like maybe a technical thing, like you just get on with it, just do your thing, then maybe they're not that interested. But I get the sense, Neil, that you have a slightly nuanced understanding of translation. What do you have? A codified or a kind of, have you thought about how you view translation, or specifically the translation of your work?
Yeah, I've always been interested in translation. I've always been interested in it in theory. So it was very exciting to have that theory come into practice in my life. And Mona and I have had lots of conversations about this, and we don't completely. We don't always agree with what the relationship between the writer and the translator should always amount to. And we were talking about this last night. I have a very clear sense of translation as creating a new book, of it being an act of creativity in and of itself.
Yeah.
And the book which emerges is a new book, and I feel very comfortable with that. And it comes from my sense, I think, of a novel, of a piece of art as endlessly circulating, that it stops being my book as soon as somebody else starts to read it. As soon as it goes to an editor, it stops being mine, starts being theirs. Then you want to keep on being somebody else's and somebody else's and somebody else's. And the same kind of paradigm applies to, in my head, to the act of translation. So I feel as though La Surface de l'eau is Mona's book as much as it is mine, or more. And I know that Mona has a slightly different take on that.
Well, yes, I mean, I do. But I still cannot exactly define what it is, because you have to be very creative to be, I mean, to translate, especially if you're translating a good book. Maybe not, but I tend to think, yes, you need to be very creative, and sometimes you can just translate something word for word, but sometimes you have to invent something totally different to just say the same thing. But no, it's not my book. It's hard to say, because what I'm doing, and all of us translator, it's this weird thing, you know, it's like translators find that it's difficult to translate their own emails because we wouldn't bother, you know, we don't use the same endings with, but so what I'm trying to do is I'm pretending I'm speaking English, it just happens to be in French. But so we're doing something that does not exist. And that's my reading of the book. Yeah, it's more like my reading of the book, but I did not invent the story. But I do invent many things. It's like Neil works a lot with sounds, with repetitions. Well, sometimes I'm going to do something here and where he didn't do it, but and also yeah, I don't have the answer to that question, but I wouldn't, it's not my book because also there are rules that each translator sets for himself. But you know, if we don't have ethics, we are lost. It's like we have no direction. You know, like if it were my book, sometime I would decide that I'm not too happy with that scene, or that paragraph is actually a bit weak, and let me cut it out, or let me add a little oomph there, or it's okay if I can't get this emotion, or so we have to be very strict about what is it we're trying to do. So maybe when we are at the third or fourth meeting of a book that Neil will have written and I'll have translated, you know, I'll have thought, given it, I'll have understood better what it is we do.
But are those ethics that you mentioned, are those ethics commonly understood in the profession?
No.
So it's quite fluid in ethical terms, would you say? Well,
in the profession, if you're talking among translators, you know, it's really, it also depends on your personality. It's good to doubt when you're a translator, but it doesn't save you from making mistakes, because, you know, you check everything and the one thing you don't check is the one thing you should have checked. But I mean, we work with our words and our perception, but also with our personality. So, I mean, I don't think many translators think that I'm not a good translator, and that's fine. You know, we all try to do decent work, but now, there are theories, you know, are you target oriented? Are you source oriented? I mean, all of this, but the ethics is so, and usually it's a combination. And then publishers, reviewers, I mean, sometimes the degree of understanding of translation is not very high sometimes, you know. You get, I mean, compliments like you cannot tell it's a translation. Well, that's kind of too bad, because it is foreign literature that you're reading. It'd be nice if you could come across that this is not a French book. It's a bit Irish, you know, that's what I've been trying to do. But so, no, I don't think, you know, it's amazing. Actually, at some point when I was more angry that now, I felt that a lot of reviewer critics, let's call them, I felt they had suffered of a kind of schizophrenia. It's like they're reading a book and they don't realize they're not reading the original. And they comment on the jokes, on the style, on the this, and which is all part of the original, but it's also has to do with the translation. So, no, I don't think this is known much.
So I think I've kind of picked up, especially over the last couple of years. And I suppose I'm thinking in particular in connection with, say, the Old Impact Prize, the Dublin Literary Award, that people in general are talking a lot more about the role of the translator in those books. It seems to me just as much as the role the original writer. That people are saying, oh, who was that and who was that? Oh, and is their name going to be on the cover? Is the translator's name going to be on the cover? And if it isn't, why not? If it isn't, it probably should be.
Yeah.
I think I mean you probably know a lot more about this than I do. But as a lay person, I think I picked this up as a part of the discourse now in a way which perhaps hadn't been the case in the past.
Well, it's good to hear you say that, actually, because I had that sense, but I talk about this every day. So I could have a really warped sense. But I did notice that on the front cover of this translation, your name isn't there. And I wanted to ask, how do you feel about that?
In France, not many publishing companies put the name on the front cover. Sabine Vispizerters, Actes Sud. I mean, it's a minority. And the newer companies do it. I feel okay because Joelle Losfeld is really a wonderful publisher. You know, she's not the kind who would tell you the marketing people would like this to be like this, or, you know, she really understands about writing, and she really respects the work of translators, and we can discuss it. And so, yes, of course, it would be pleasant, but
well, some translators actually don't want their name on the front cover because, like you said, it's not my book. It's someone else's book and I'm the translator.
Well, you know what I want on the front cover is the name and the language. I mean, you look at a bookstore in the window and you don't know where the book comes from.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. You don't know if it's French, Italian, Irish, or
what.
So it's not just the translator, it's also the original language that, you know, still exists, actually. But
yeah.
Okay, well, I know that you've picked out a favorite part that you're both going to read in your respective languages. So would this be a good time for us to jump into that?
yes. It's the very beginning, actually.
Yeah, it's the very beginning. That's just the first couple of pages. It's set on the shoreline of Loch Foyle, so up in the almost at the northern tip of the country, and it's 1983. Time to Kill.
1983. Tuer le temps qui tue.
September, and the Donegal countryside had already turned to autumn. Summer just passed had been warm and wet, and the hedgerows and verges had become heavy with growth. But the grasses were fading and bleaching with the season, and now, late in the afternoon, they were bowed, soaked, and dripping with the day's rain. In the ditch, a stream gurgled on its way downhill towards the loch. The rain, though, had lately stopped, and the sky was clearing from the west, a pale, clean blue, and the air cool and fresh.
Septembre, et c'était déjà l'automne dans la campagne du Donegal. L'été écoulé avait été chaud et pluvieux, chargeant les haies et bas-côtés d'une épaisse végétation. Mais avec l'avancée de la saison, les herbes s'éteignaient, pâlissaient. À présent, en cette fin d'après-midi, elles ployaient et s'égouttaient, gorgées d'une journée de pluie. Dans le fossé, un ruisseau dévalait en chantant vers le loch. La pluie, cependant, avait cessé depuis peu et le ciel se dégageait par l'ouest. Un bleu pâle et propre et dans l'air une fraîcheur neuve.
And there was Christine Casey, aged 8, cycling home slowly from school.
Et puis il y avait Christine Casey, 8 ans, qui rentrait de l'école en pédalant lentement.
There was no hurry this evening. Dinner would be a little later than usual. Her mum had a meeting to go to in town. So Christine was cycling slowly.
Pas besoin de se dépêcher ce soir. Le dîner serait un peu plus tard que d'habitude. Sa maman avait une réunion en ville. Alors Christine pédalait lentement.
Patrick Jackson saw all this. He watched the scene unfold from behind closed eyelids. today, a weakening autumn sun was shining through the window onto his bed, onto the sky blue counterpane, onto hard white walls, onto his loose skin and prominent cheekbones. It shone onto the translucent skin on his eyelids and turned his vision into a screen awash of dusty pink. But in his mind, the scene was harshly lit and immediate, and he was following the girl along the lane that was dim and dripping and shaggy with the summer's growth.
Patrick Jackson voyait tout cela. Il regardait la scène se dérouler derrière ses paupières closes. Aujourd'hui, un soleil d'automne faiblissant traversait la fenêtre et tombait sur son lit, tombait sur le couvre-lit bleu ciel, sur les murs blancs et durs, sur sa peau flasque et ses pommettes saillantes. Il tombait sur la peau translucide de ses paupières et transformait sa vision en écran, en l'avis d'un rose poudré. Mais dans son esprit, la scène avait un éclairage cru et elle était immédiate. Et il suivait la petite fille le long du chemin sombre et dégouttelant, ébouriffé de broussailles d'été.
As if he was tracking her, snuffling along in her wake. He had done it so many times by now, following her track, the lane, soaking hedges and gurgling ditches, and aware of the fragrant air, the sinking sun, the gradually diminishing light.
Comme s'il suivait sa trace, avançait en reniflant dans son sillage. Il l'avait fait tant de fois, suivre sa trace, le chemin, les haies gorgées d'eau et les fossés chantants, conscient de l'air parfumé, du soleil qui se couche et de la lumière qui baisse peu à peu.
Patrick watched. He knew the way this would turn out. There was only one way.
Patrick regardait. Il savait comment ça allait tourner. Il n'y avait qu'une seule façon.
He kept his eyelids closed tightly as the autumn sunlight tracked slowly along the wall.
Il demeurait paupières obstinément fermées, tandis que la lumière automnale parcourait lentement les murs.
He knew that the child's bicycle was found minutes after she was taken, there in the wet ditch in the shadow of the hawthorn hedge, not by her mother or by her father, but by the farmer who worked the fields on either side of the lane, the farmer who hadn't been doing his job properly on the hedging and ditching front. The farmer who saw her bicycle as he passed along slowly, saw its front wheel gleaming, prominent in the midst of the grasses in that dusky lane.
Il savait que la bicyclette de l'enfant avait été trouvée quelques minutes après que celle-ci eût été emmenée. Trouvée là, dans le fossé trempé, dans l'ombre de la haie d'aubépine. Ni par sa mère, ni par son père, mais par le fermier qui cultivait les champs de part et d'autre du chemin. Le fermier qui ne s'était pas acquitté correctement de sa tâche d'entretien des haies et fossés. Le fermier qui vit la bicyclette en passant lentement, vit la roue avant qui luisait. Ça sautait aux yeux au milieu des herbes dans ce chemin sombre.
This farmer stopped to look around the ditch, filled with the summer of growth and with detritus, with litter and aluminium cans, with water flowing. He looked around. The hawthorn, with its thorns and heavy bundles of red berries, caught and tangled in his hair, and lifted the tweed cap off his head.
Ce fermier s'arrêta pour examiner le fossé envahi par les broussailles et le rebut de l'été, les papiers sales et les canettes d'aluminium, par l'eau qui coulait. Il regarda autour de lui. L'aubépine, avec ses épines et ses lourdes grappes de baies rouges, se prit dans ses cheveux et lui arracha sa casquette de tweed.
He looked, and an instinct bawled at him to leave this place and get to a telephone. He snatched his cap and ran.
Il tourna la tête et son instinct lui cria de quitter ce lieu et d'aller trouver un téléphone. Il attrapa la casquette et partit en courant.
Well chosen, thank you. I wanted also to ask, Mona, were there any particular parts of the book that you found especially challenging or that gave you, maybe you had to return to them?
the whole book took a lot of work, not like, you know, those amazing difficulties that but it's just a lot of work and fine tuning. But I would say there were two different kind of challenges, because there were, I mean, this is very, there were plenty of different type of writings in it, but like the part we've just read, the syntax is very clear, it's very well built, it's and it's very evocative. And then there are whole chapters or many pages where you're in between narration and stream of consciousness, and it's totally, and so you work differently. Now in this introduction, you know, just in the short, those short pages that we've read, the work had a lot to do, well, always with Neil, with the rhythm and the sound, but a lot with the vocabulary, because, I mean, the more I read the beginning, I think what happens here is the sheer beauty of Arton in Donegal. And I mean, I saw it in spring, and I can imagine how glorious it is. It was that September day. And little by little, the same landscape. I mean, at first you have the water running, and everything is like soaking with sunlight and water and flowers. And then the same place, it turns filthy. It's like it's desecrated, you know, and all of a sudden you have the thorns and the aluminum cans. And so I worked a lot on vocabulary, and there's a gentle way in which you can invent when you're translating Neil's writing. And in this one, see all those images of water, it's really lush. I mean, there are words that I don't think I had used in 35 years of translating. It's like, and it's tiny details that I think just translators would notice. But when he's following the little girl in his mind and he's describing the past, I used the, and it's dripping, I used the word dégouttelant. Now it does exist, dégouttelé for dripping, but it's very rare. And dégouttelant does not exist. But I did use a lot of those words like s'égoutter, which you don't use like that, or gorger, which is, you know, gorger, it's kind of, it's a bit of the biblical vocabulary, you know, the milk and the water, and the vocabulary of abundance and not about, yeah, of plenty. And so, yeah, so there's parts where I really worked on this aspect, and others where when it's more following somebody's thoughts and working on the rhythm, and what with English tending to have shorter words, how do you balance the repetition? How do you get the rhythm? It did help me a lot to get used to hear Neil speak a lot, because, you know, I read him, I mean, as a translator, I read a book, I'm already translating it because I'm reading it with my accent, even in up here. So it's already changed, you know. Yeah, so those were the main two. But in the parts where, you know, yeah, there's a character I think we're both very fond of is, well, which one do you think I'm going to bring in?
Sarah?
No, but I did.
Not Sarah, I didn't mean Sarah.
No, you know, what's her name?
Cassie.
Cassie, yes.
Yeah, good. Cassie.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. Well, Cassie is this slightly unusual character, and she comes up with unexpected images, you know. And so sometimes if I'm doing Cassie, I can, because I've met her through the pages, I can decide that, yeah, in French, she would have tried this.
Yeah, because you mentioned the scene towards the end, didn't you? The couple of lines, where was it? I probably can't find it now.
Oh, I think I have it.
Yeah, the blue.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, yeah. You
Yeah, I
got
think I have it somewhere.
it?
Wait. So maybe while I'm looking, maybe you can explain what's going on in that little scene. Not little scene, that long scene.
Cassie is, in this scene, towards the end of the Cassie is still young. She grows older, and she's an old woman when we meet her at the beginning of the book. But she's hardly more than a girl in this section towards the end, and she's standing in the same stretch of coastline on Loch Foyle. But this time it's a freezing cold day. It's a frosty day, frost in the air, there's frost on the ground. And she says, did you find it? Did we read it out?
I have too many papers.
Doesn't matter. But Mona,
No, I didn't, but I remember. You can read the sentence. I just remember.
she's looking at the sea, and she's also looking at her hands, and she's seeing the blue of her cold hands, but also the blue of the whole world really on this frosty day. And she says, and blue, she thought, as blue as anything could be, bluer than the sky, bluer than my hands. And she looked at her blue tinged icy hands, bluer than anything. And when we were talking about this, Mona was describing how that can be translated in French in a very specific way, bluer than anything. You know, these little small things, which as an English speaker, I wouldn't have any sense of translating into a different language.
So, I mean, I remember what I did, and unfortunately, I think it's in my bag actually, but I said, aussi bleu que bleu se peut, because I was using the sound effect, which he wasn't particularly doing at that time, but Cassie being this woman who thinks that the sea looks like a trout or a fish she saw at the fishmonger. I think she could have said, aussi bleu que bleu se peut. So little things like that. But there's the part also, you know, that final paragraph also, but maybe this is something, yeah.
Oh yeah, the very last, very end.
Yeah, do you think it's a spoiler?
No, actually I don't.
It's a very simple paragraph, it seems so, but I think it has lots in it.
Okay, so they struck out across the shingle, the two of them. The sky was lightening a little now, Margaret noticed. The disk of the sun, is this what you mean? The
Yes.
disk of the sun was showing white, sailing behind thinning white clouds, and their shadows were falling away behind them as they walked.
So here for me, you know, it wasn't that easy. What am I going to do with, it was showing white sailing behind thinning white clouds. I mean, the minute you translate this, you have an editor underlining and saying répétition, which is, you know. So, and yet obviously, you know, it's very super important. I mean, that's the whole point of the sentence. And then, so here's what I did. I said, le disque du soleil se montrait glissant, blanc, derrière les nuages blancs qui s'étiraient, et leurs ombres s'effaçaient derrière elles, à mesure de leurs pas. And so the conversation with one editor was, but it would be so much nicer to have the novel ending on the shadows disappearing. And I said, no way, because what's important to me, but Neil said, yes, okay. I thought that it was very important not to end with their shadows falling away behind them, but to end with as they walked. Mm-hmm. I think it gave a whole different ending to the novel. And I kind of thought that we'd spend all those pages to arrive to they walked. So well, I'm getting a bit carried away, but so see this kind of things that how do you get this? Because you wouldn't say pendant qu'elle marchait, you know, it wouldn't work. So anyway, this kind of things.
You sort of get a sense of the many conversations that we had where it was necessary to kind of pin things down, to pinpoint exactly what I meant, and then what Mona meant. And it was time consuming, but it was very, very necessary. In order to get things right, get things into a kind of a harmony between the two voices. I think.
Yes, I mean, it's hard to be. I feel I really need to be sure I understand what he meant. And then I feel totally free to go as far as I think I need to. But if I'm not sure that I understood what he's doing, then it's difficult.
And I suppose if you were asked questions by an editor when you were not fully confident of what you were trying to say, then you can't really defend.
No, I can't stand my ground. No, absolutely. Yeah,
it's important for us to remember actually that it's as invisible as the translator can be. There's all sorts of other people in the process that often have a really important role to play, and we may not even be aware as readers that they're there, but they are. That's our signal.
It's really important to work with the publisher who has whom you enjoy working with, or you understand each other, or you can, because otherwise you're just miserable.
Well, I could monopolize this conversation all night, but we still have a few minutes left of the session, so I would like to open the floor up and see whether there's anyone else who'd like to ask a question, and including the people online. There are quite a few people online, and if you would like to ask a question online, please just type away in the chat box and I'll see it on the screen here. So please go ahead.
I question about the sound. Mona, you mentioned that you worked with the sound, and you just talked about the harmony between the two voices. I was wondering, while you were working, did you read each other passages out loud?
No, I mean, he wrote the book. He's not going to write the whole translation again. It would be wonderful to do. We might have, I think, the odd sentence, or I would say, this is this, but otherwise, it would be a lot of work on Neil.
I mean, I had no issue with any aspect of the questions and answers, or going back over the text again and again. I found it so interesting. I found it so interesting to have some insight into Mona's method. It was just a really stimulating experience, and that was the way it was all the way through.
But also, I think at one point I need to be working on my own, and kind of, this is it. You're no longer intimidated. You feel legitimate, and you take ownership of the text you're writing.
Please go ahead.
Yes.
Inevitably, that.
Yes, we can. Next question. Yes, they can. Inch levels. Well, we could not keep inch levels, which, do you all know what is inch levels?
It's a place, it's a landscape. It's an area of reclaimed land, which is now nature reserve on the Derry Donegal border. It was reclaimed in the 19th century. So it's very tranquil, it's very beautiful, and it's held very, very delicately in balance between land and sea. So this ostensibly very tranquil landscape needs all sorts of machinery to keep the sea out. It needs pumps and it needs sluice gates. So I understood that it was a very, very good metaphor for the family, the story I was telling, that everything seems fine on the surface, but in fact it's a bit like a duck paddling. Things are going furiously on underneath. So I thought this is the title that works extremely well for me in this iteration of the book, But in French,
In French, people would have been clueless. And I came up with a few titles, and Joelle Losfeld didn't like them. There was one that was maybe, I mean, she told me nobody's going to buy a book called L'Estran, which
which I really like.
which means I forgot what's the name, what it means.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. But it's, you know, and then, yeah, it was really difficult. And finally, Joelle Losfeld found the title, and I loved it. And I remember WhatsApping Neil and saying, okay, that's the title. And he liked it too.
I was really happy when, so it all ended in Holland.
In France, titles is really most often, I mean, it's the publishers has the final cut on the title, definitely.
Which is the same in English too. My second novel went by a completely different title almost until the end. And then they said, no, it can't be called this, it has to be called the Jewel. and I said, okay. So I had to kind of do this thing, I had to sit in my head and say, I've just written a novel called Jewel. Because you don't get to find the same, which can be a surprise, I think, to people kind of starting out in this industry or whatever, but the authors don't get to find the same on a lot of things. And that's just the way it is.
Please.
The two of you seem to have such a lovely working relationship and a good personal relationship. I'm just wondering, Mona, would you consider at any point translating Neil's second novel, The Jewel?
Yes.
Have you talked about that?
It's on my to-do list. You see, it came out only not even 3 weeks ago. This one came out only 3 weeks ago in France. So yes, I hope Joelle will buy the translation rights to The Jewel. And I wouldn't be surprised that she does. Because, yeah. So, yeah, definitely.
That's exciting.
Yes.
There's a question online which I haven't actually come across before, so I really would like to ask it to you, Mona. So this person is hooked on to the fact that you don't feel completely comfortable claiming the translation as your work, and has said, is this a little bit like when someone is an actor portraying a character on stage, and for that performance they are ostensibly that character, but that doesn't mean that they own the character. Like, they didn't write the lines, they didn't create the whole play, but they are that character. Can you see a similarity in that metaphor?
Yes, I've never heard that metaphor, and I think I like it. I mean, a common one, which I used to like a lot, and maybe a little less, but I still like it, is, you know, like you have a score and you are a pianist, so you're playing the score. But I guess it works with I mean, I cannot see myself as an actor, but yes, maybe, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a nice
It took me a long time to ask the question and not very long to answer it, but yes, okay. Are there any other questions, please?
The question for Neil is about translation and Northern Ireland. You start off with talking about deep layers of silence and different codes, and there's a lot of work that's been done on the kind of different sociolects of both of them different communities, and you know, what you say is not what you mean not what you say. And is there a sense in which it's, you know, everybody in the community is a kind of translator that constantly decoding, translating, and that one of the great difficulties in the political tragedies is the failure of translation, the failure of communicating across it. And you know, when translation breaks down, translation mechanisms. So there's a sense in which, you know, working with Mona would also, you know, have, and you talk about your interest in translation and the notion of translation, but is there any way that's kind of related to, you know, that ongoing experience of, you know, of communication, or the attempts of communication of difference?
Yeah, I think that there's a widespread unwillingness to choose to empathize all that much in my home place. I had a weird experience. I won't go into the details of it now, but I had a weird experience in Belfast last week. I haven't been to Belfast for 2 or 3 years, and I was in the Ulster Museum, and I saw an element in an exhibition, which I felt really strongly as its form of, to be a form of aggression. I felt it almost as though I'd been assaulted by the choice of words in this ostensibly mixed space and safe space. And I was looking at this piece for a long time, thinking, who curated this, and how could we possibly have thought that this was a good idea? And I experienced it as somebody or some institution saying, no, this is what this is what we're going to say, and you're going to be polite and say nothing about it. And I think that there's a lot of leaning on the idea of politeness in Northern Ireland to keep people silent, especially in sort of middle class culture. You smile and the conversation carries on, even though there's been an element of aggression in what's just been said. You're expected not to say anything and reply. I think a lot of people talk about the emergence of a sort of a third way, a mixed space in Northern Ireland, but it seems to me that hasn't evolved nearly as much as people think it has, and that it's an easy way of not unpacking, of not doing all the work that still needs to be done. I'm very interested in the politeness being used as a weapon and as a form of aggression, and I think that's extremely prevalent in the north, in middle class circles, where it's even less unpacked and even less likely to be unpacked or addressed. Does that come close to you?
And we have time for one more question. Does anyone have another burning question that they didn't have time to ask yet?
This is Jill coming out. There's you.
That's to be seen, I guess. Well, then it remains for me to thank both of you for joining us today. It's really lovely to see you again, especially after the circumstances under which we had to part ways last time, which was really a shame. But we were delighted, Mona, that you were our first fellow, and even more delighted that you've come back to share the fruits of your labours. And Neil as well. It's fantastic that you are our first source author for this, because you really get translation in a way that not everyone does. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.